We were deep in the swamps when we found it, half buried in muck, shaped like a submarine, and completely out of place. At first glance, it looked like scrap metal, rusted and forgotten, but something about it radiated unease. Captain Reed was determined to investigate, and despite the sinking feeling in our stomachs, we followed. The mud sucked at our boots as we trudged closer, the air heavy with the stink of rot and stagnant water. The hull was pitted with rust, strewn with algae, its metal skin scarred as if it had been dragged here against its will. Sheriff Blake lingered back, uneasy, while Deputy Mia circled wearily, arms crossed. Kyle and I exchanged a glance. It didn't belong here, not in these swamps, not in this world, and whatever waited inside was already pulling us in. Hesitation hung over the group. They decided to investigate cautiously, with Reed leading the way inside. Kyle's chest tightened with both excitement and unease as they crossed the threshold. But before we continue, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss what's coming next. The air was damp, metallic, and oppressive, wrapping around them as they stepped deeper into the dark unknown. Their footsteps echoed as they moved forward, the rusty walls surrounding them like a maze. Each shadow seemed to hide something just out of sight, making every creak and clank seem louder than ever. The walls were rusted and the air was damp and carried an odd metallic smell. Kyle noticed how strange everything looked. It was as if time had forgotten this place. Reed kept moving, focused on discovering whatever secrets were hidden. Sheriff Blake started to examine the walls closely, peeling back layers of grime. Kyle could feel a thrill in his footsteps, like a kid on an unexpected treasure hunt. Inside, strange markings covered the submarine's interior walls. They snapped photos, the flash slicing through the gloom, while the uneasy silence grew heavier. Under a seat, Mia uncovered a dusty, brittle journal. The group gathered close as she brushed it off, its fragile cover hinting at forgotten years. It felt like a relic. They carried it outside, sunlight spilling across the pages as they cracked it open. Kyle watched her scan the faded pages, eager for insights. Deputy Mia began to read aloud, her voice cutting through the murmur of the swamp. Each word seemed to reveal bits and pieces, pulling them deeper into a mystery that grew more complex by the second. The journal was crammed with half-finished notes, scattered numbers, and sketches that made little sense. Some pages showed geometric patterns, others rough outlines of strange machines, and a few depicted shadowy landscapes that looked nothing like the swamps around them. Bits of writing repeated certain symbols, almost like a code. They couldn't piece it together here, not in the damp air with the pages flaking under their fingers. Carefully, they packed the journal away and started back toward town. The swamp seemed quieter than before. Every ripple and branch creak. For Kyle, the urgency was relentless. The submarine, the markings, the journal, they were fragments of a story waiting to be uncovered, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they had only brushed the surface of something far bigger. Determined not to turn back, the group brought the journal into town and placed it in the hands of Mr. Turner, a local historian. At his cluttered desk, he turned the brittle pages with practiced care, his eyes lighting up as he studied the contents. The sketches appeared to be navigational tools from another era, hastily drawn diagrams suggesting routes or voyages alongside strange coordinates scrolled in the margins. He compared them to maps spread across his desk, tracing lines and symbols with growing fascination. The group hovered nearby, breathless with anticipation. Whatever these markings meant, they hinted at origins far stranger than they had first imagined, perhaps even pointing to where the submarine had come from. Turner's fascination only fueled the group's determination. Mia began combing through historical records, searching archives for any mention of lost submarines. Reed joined in, poring over old naval files and grainy photographs. Hours passed in tense silence until Mia uncovered an old newspaper clipping from the Cold War. It described a prototype submarine classified and later declared a failed mission lost without a trace. The revelation hung heavy over them. At last, there was a possible link between the rusting vessel and the swamp. The discovery suggested they had stumbled onto more than an abandoned relic. It was a hidden piece of the past. The weight of their discovery was sinking in. The submarine no longer seemed like a rusting relic. It might have been part of a secret mission that never officially ended. That possibility gave the group a sense of awe and unease. They agreed among themselves to keep quiet, to move carefully, and not to draw attention until they knew what they were truly dealing with. Later that evening, the local pub became the setting for their next concern. A stranger entered, his presence sharp and deliberate. He scanned the room with practiced eyes, asking subtle questions that circled around the swamp and the discovery. At first, it seemed like casual curiosity, but the longer he lingered, the clearer it became. He was there for more than idle chatter. The group watched him carefully from their corner, each of them tense. Something about his manner felt off. It was as though he was tracing the edges of a secret he already half knew. The realization was chilling. Their find had already slipped beyond their control. Someone else was looking, someone who might have ties to the submarine's past. The pub's familiar warmth now felt charged, the air heavier with suspicion. Their discovery, once an adventure shared among friends, had suddenly turned into something larger, darker, and more dangerous than they had ever expected. Sheriff Blake decided to take the lead, approaching the stranger with calm professionalism. Their exchange was brief, measured, neither giving much away, both weighing the other carefully. It was a quiet game of cat and mouse, and Blake knew better than to reveal anything about the group's discovery. Meanwhile, Mia studied the man from across the room, noting how deliberately he mingled and asked questions. His interest was too pointed to be casual, and it set the group on edge. Outside, the sky darkened, thunder rumbling in the distance. A storm rolled in, pinning them in town and halting any plans to return to the swamp. Forced to wait, they shifted focus, turning to old archives and digital records. The library became their base of operations, its quiet stacks filled with the rustle of papers and the glow of screens. If the weather kept them away from the wreck, they would use the time to unearth its history. Every scrap of information felt like another piece of the puzzle, and the deeper they dug, the clearer it became that the submarine was no ordinary relic. Captain Reed uncovered a reference to a retired admiral tied to the era when the submarine might have been active, and with some digging, Kyle managed to track down a number and arrange a meeting. On the day of the visit, nerves ran high. The admiral greeted them with a guarded demeanor, his posture tense and unwelcoming. Inside his home, the air felt heavy, every glance and gesture measured. Reed and Blake exchanged uneasy looks, sensing both suspicion and curiosity in their host. The mention of the submarine seemed to stir something in him, though he concealed it behind a mask of restraint. The admiral, after a moment of hesitation, agreed to share what he knew, warning them that their discovery was never meant to see the light of day. He spoke of the submarine as a top-secret project, an experimental venture buried under layers of secrecy. The group listened closely, realizing they had stumbled into classified history. The admiral's tone darkened as he revealed the constant shadow of espionage during the project, hinting at spies and international intrigue. The weight of his words settled heavily on them. Their quiet town, once thought ordinary, was now tied to hidden chapters of the Cold War. The swamp was no longer just a backwater, it held dangerous truths long forgotten. And for the first time, they realized they had only begun to scratch the surface of what they had uncovered. Captain Reed looked back at the submarine, a glint of determination in his eyes. When the storm cleared, they made their way back into the swamp. The ground was thick with mud, but the submarine stood unchanged. With effort, the hatch creaked open, and inside they found neat rows of sealed plastic. The contents stopped them cold. Old passports and different names, foreign currency bundled in rubber bands. Everything pointed to a life lived in shadows. It was more than evidence. It was a carefully constructed network of false identities and covert operations. The swamp no longer felt like forgotten land. It was a vault hiding relics of espionage and unfinished missions. Each object carried the weight of secrets never meant to be unearthed, leaving the group with a growing sense that they had stumbled into something far larger than they were prepared to face. Reed nodded slowly, his eyes scanning the open hatch, now a gateway not just to the past, but to a deeper mystery. Captain Reed had the group carefully catalog each item, determined to build a clear record before drawing conclusions. Back at the station, the table was soon covered with passports, phones, and stacks of currency. A web of clues that felt far from random. The bins were organized with meticulous intent, more like a spy's toolkit than discarded relics. The team sifted through the identities, piecing together possibilities and theories of espionage. Each artifact hinted at lives, lived in secrecy and missions long buried. Excitement mingled with unease as they realized the scope of what they had uncovered. Sheriff Blake reminded them of the need for discretion. Whatever this was, it had been meant to remain hidden, and spreading word too soon could spark panic. With a silent understanding, the group agreed to keep their findings contained, bound by secrecy as they prepared to dig even deeper into the swamp's mystery. Talk of the submarine spread quickly, fueling rumors and wild theories that gripped the community. Each day, more curious locals lingered near the swamp, convinced the team knew more than they were letting on. Sheriff Blake worked to keep things calm, brushing off questions, but the attention only grew. Kyle deflected inquiries as best he could, keeping his words vague while privately battling his own questions. Deputy Mia monitored the gossip closely, tapping into her network to track unusual movements and outsiders drawn to the mystery. Among them was a stranger whose persistence unsettled the group. His watchful presence suggested more than idle curiosity, as though he had his own stake in the hidden submarine. With the town buzzing and outsiders circling, the team felt the weight of secrets pressing harder than ever. As uncertain as it was, the group knew a confrontation with him might come soon. Reed reminded the group to stay cautious as the town's chatter grew louder, speculation running wild. The pressure spiked when the stranger approached at last, carrying himself with a confidence that unsettled them all. Sheriff Blake stepped forward to meet him, his stance firm, leaving no room for compromise. The air thickened as the confrontation escalated. The stranger pressed for answers, frustration simmering beneath his measured words, while Blake's patience wore thin. The rest of the team closed ranks, silent but united, their unease mirrored in wary glances. Something about the man's determination hinted he knew more than he let on, perhaps even more than they did. His presence felt less like idle curiosity and more like a calculated intrusion. Reed and Kyle moved in before the standoff could tip into open conflict, steadying the moment and holding back a storm that threatened to break. After the stranger retreated, the group gathered by the swamp, uneasy about how close things had come to unraveling. The water lay still, the reeds whispering in the wind, as if the place itself held on to secrets. They tightened security, making sure every box and scrap of evidence was carefully logged and locked away. Sheriff Blake oversaw the handoff to a trusted technician, the transfer done quietly and without fanfare. In the days that followed, they immersed themselves in their notes and sketches. Each small clue felt like a fragment of a larger pattern, a jigsaw puzzle that hinted at hidden motives and long-buried intentions. The deeper they looked, the less random it all seemed, as if the swamp had been guarding more than just decay. Back in town, however, the silence they tried to keep was drowned out by chatter. The submarine had grown into a legend almost overnight, rumors twisting through barber shops, grocery aisles, and late-night porches. Some whispered of treasure, others of espionage. Each theory more elaborate than the last. Keeping the truth contained was becoming nearly impossible. Every curious glance in their direction felt heavier, and each careless rumor seemed to push the mystery further out of their grasp. Kyle, more than anyone, carried the strain, convinced that if the whispers spread too far, what they had uncovered might slip beyond their control forever. The team felt the growing weight of outside attention. Aware that reporters might soon circle in. To stay ahead, they crafted a careful plan, spreading harmless stories to keep curiosity fed while protecting the truth. Then the forensic results arrived, shattering the fragile balance. The evidence traced back to a Navy officer declared dead 12 years earlier, a man who, by all accounts, should not have existed. The revelation sent a chill through the group, reshaping the mystery into something far larger than they had imagined. Huddled together in the back room of the station, the gravity of it settled in. The officer hadn't just vanished, he had disappeared with classified documents, leaving behind the wreckage of secrets that now linked directly to the submarine. Suddenly, what they had thought was an isolated curiosity began to look like the edge of an espionage case buried in history. Speculation grew heavy in the room. Had the officer faked his own death? Was the submarine part of a carefully hidden operation? The possibilities twisted through their thoughts, each one darker than the last. What had begun as a strange discovery in the swamp was now spiraling into a web of deceit and covert history, pulling them deeper than they'd ever expected. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss amazing stories like this one.